You know, that's not the man I voted for, but that's the man I think America needs right now. So I think he's got to sort of really make that same kind of effort today, and maybe he will touch some of these people who might be open to trying to give this a chance and see where we go.
Thank you, Deborah. I want to bring in Martha Raddatz on this as well. You wear two hats, Martha. You spent a lot of time over the last year speaking with voters across the country during this campaign, particularly Trump voters. You're also our chief global affairs anchor. So talk about both. What do Republicans, Trump supporters need to hear from this new president? What does the world need and expect to hear?
I think those Republicans who will listen to Joe Biden and those Republicans who feel he will be the next president of the United States need to hear some sort of inclusion. They need to be touched in that way, because I think this division in the Republican Party is unlike any other we have ever seen. Donald Trump was such a powerful, almost cult-like figure to so many, those people who voted for him. I've talked to some of the Trump voters who I talked to across the nation. They're not listening today. Others will. Others want to move on. Others want to hear what he has to say. But now they feel like they are on the outs, that no one will listen to them. And I think that is such an important message. You know, I look at this Capitol today, and I look at that beautiful arch with the red bunting. That is where those protesters came 2 weeks ago, those rioters who stormed the Capitol. That very same doorway Donald Trump walked out of 4 years ago. It is really a bookend legacy for him. He walked out of that door. Joe Biden will walk out of that door. But this is a new chapter. And in so many ways, you think this inauguration was certainly marred by those events, but it also makes it so much more profound that you can turn the page. It's inspiring what has happened in those 2 weeks. You look at Eugene Goodman, who was walking up there, who steered some of those rioters away from the Senate gallery and quick thinking. You look at those military bands, this ceremony. I'm a total sucker for those military bands. But the rest of the world will also see a new chapter. They will see that democracy survived. They will know that Joe Biden will take on a new agenda, and there are people who will agree with that and who will not agree with that. I'm sure North Korea is not too happy that they lost their friend in the White House, but he will have challenges. But the world knows that a page is turning today. George.
Thank you, Martha. Sarah Fagan, you worked for a president who was coming into times nothing like this. The turmoil wasn't nearly as bad, but George W. Bush became president after a disputed election back in 2001. He knew there was great division. There were great protests in the streets. Talk about how you all thought about that address.
Well, we knew that it was an important point for him to bring the country together, and really his best opportunity to bring the country together. It's the speech that most Americans will tune into. I was really struck in getting prepared for today, thinking the parallels. Yes, the divisions are stronger, but many Democrats boycotted the inaugural, like some Republicans are doing today.
There you see former Vice President Dan Quayle. Go on.
Yeah, the protests were significant. The security was significant. But one big difference, Al Gore, despite having felt extremely cheated by the Supreme Court, showed up on that podium. And that was a very important moment for the country, and it showed the class that Al Gore displayed that day. And we're not going to see that by the president. We will see it by Mike Pence, which I think the vice president today is not about politics, but he is helping himself politically a great deal. Short term in the Republican Party, perhaps not, but long term, he's doing the right thing for the country.
Thank you, Sarah. We just saw, as I said, the former Vice President Dan Quayle arrive. The former Republican Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, also arrived earlier, all saying he wanted to support the institutions. You see Senator Susan Collins right there as well. She will have a tough choice, along with other Republican senators, on whether or not to convict President Trump, as that second impeachment trial is likely to begin within days of this inauguration. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has still not said, Mary Bruce, let me bring you in on this, when she's going to send over that article of impeachment. The one thing we know is she wants to get through this inaugural address first.
Yeah, look, they are well aware that you have these two monumentous things colliding. Joe Biden trying to get to work, eager to show the nation that he can get to work on his agenda at the exact same time that Washington and Congress is likely to be consumed with the Senate trial of President Trump. Now, we know Biden and Mitch McConnell had been discussing, how to share the day, essentially, if there's a way so that Biden can get some work on his agenda done, get Congress to consider his nominees, for instance, and then in the afternoons hold the Senate trial. But, of course, starting this afternoon, Chuck Schumer will be in charge of the Senate, Democrats taking control of Congress. The question then becomes, when will Nancy Pelosi send over the articles of impeachment? We do expect that could happen as soon as later this week. That then kicks off the Senate trial immediately, essentially. And so Washington is now going to see another thing that we have never seen before in our nation's history, not just the impeachment trial of a former president, but happening at the exact same time as Joe Biden is desperately trying to get this country to move on. It is just remarkable.
And there we see former President Clinton, former Secretary of State and Senator Hillary Clinton now coming as well. Neither played a huge role in the Biden campaign. Both spoke, but briefly, at the convention. David Muir, has to be a bittersweet moment for Secretary Clinton. Of course, she won the popular vote 4 years ago, did not become president. So both bittersweet, bitter, and then a reminder of that day, but sweet, some sort of vindication.
You would have to think, George, but she's been very careful with her words, particularly in the last couple of weeks since those deadly riots at the Capitol. But we all remember the scene 4 years ago when she showed up after having won the popular vote, and she witnessed the inauguration of Donald Trump, something we're not seeing from him today for Joe Biden.
And here comes the ruffles and flourishes. Lindsay Davis, Kamala Harris is going to have a great first duty when she is vice president this afternoon. She will swear in those new Democratic senators.
Right, and it's interesting that she'll also be sworn in by Sonia Sotomayor, of course, the first Latino on the Supreme Court and a third female to join the Supreme Court. Not all that long ago, George, this moment seemed unimaginable, really, when we're talking about Kamala Harris becoming vice president. And in 1976, Carol Simpson, former ABC News anchor, she interviewed Barbara Jordan, Congresswoman, an ambitious black female politician in her own right. We'll come back to,
go ahead.
Continue? Okay. And she asked Barbara Jordan at that time, do you think that this country is ready for a black female vice president? At the time, Jordan quickly said no. She didn't think that this country was ready, but she said, I'm going to help them to get ready. And now, ready or not, here she comes. Kamala, of course, means lotus flower, which is a symbol of significance in Indian culture. And the lotus grows underwater. It's a flower, though, that rises above the surface, and yet the roots remain deeply embedded in the river bottom.
And now we see George W. and Laura Bush approaching as well. President Obama, President Clinton, President Bush will all accompany Joe Biden to Arlington Cemetery this afternoon, a show of unity. President Carter wanted to be there, sends his regrets. Of course, he's 96 years old. He and Rosalind could not make it to Washington today. Byron Pitts, that's going to be an important moment to see those three presidents accompany the new president to Arlington Cemetery, saying something important about where our country is right now, the unity that remains beneath the surface of this great division we also see.
George, that's right. I mean, unity is a big part of the theme today, and seeing those images will be important. And looking at the former presidents, it reminds me that being president is about the future, right? We see President Obama there as he comes in.
President Obama, First Lady Michelle Obama. Probably could not have imagined this moment either. But he worked hard to make it happen. Both he and the First Lady in the final days and weeks of the campaign, going across the country to make sure
George W. Bush,
Joe Biden to get elected. Here comes President Bush. Christy, as we see him come down, I'm smiling to myself as I remember that his reaction to President Trump's inaugural 4 years ago.
Yeah, it was vintage President Bush 43, and you know, the interesting thing is there's our last Republican president who showed how he handled himself in his post-presidency life. Went back to Dallas, lives at the end of a cul-de-sac in a very normal-looking house, and went to painting and to supporting his presidential center. And I think one of the real challenges now for Donald Trump, given his vast difference in personality to George W. Bush, is what does he do with himself now? And I think it's going to be a challenge for him to decide, once again, whether he has to make himself the center of everything or whether he wants to become part of that group that is
on that
on the
point,
stage.
George W. Bush barely seen at all in public over the last years, except for his cause, very specific causes.
But when that Saturday after the election, when all the races were called, it was President George W. Bush who put out a statement congratulating President-elect Biden and calling President-elect Biden to congratulate him. What he understands is the role of a statesman.
And he put out that statement after the siege of the Capitol as well. President Obama, First Lady Michelle Obama. Cecilia Vega, Barack Obama chose Joe Biden as his vice president. He trusted Joe Biden as his vice president. He writes about being irritated at times by Joe Biden as vice president, but in the end, they became brothers.
They are indeed brothers to this day, George. You know, and David mentioned earlier that Joe Biden had initially said he didn't want to be vice president to Barack Obama. Ultimately, it was his mother who said, "Come on, basically, what are you doing?" But yeah, in Joe Biden's memoirs, he said that he felt often that Obama, I'm paraphrasing here, was too heady, that he thought about things so much that he was deliberate to a fault. And others in the Obama circle have said that, you know, Joe Biden has a tendency to be long-winded. He likes to talk, and that he could often kind of go into left field. And when President Obama was deliberate in talking about line A, Joe Biden would come in and say, "Hey, but Mr. President, what about Z?" and sort of veer these conversations off course. And frankly, you know, Joe Biden felt like he wasn't. Oh, I'm gonna let you go, George.
Well, yeah, there you see the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, Sonia Sotomayor, Justice Sonia Sotomayor as well. Chief Justice, of course, will be administering the oath to Joe Biden. Back when Barack Obama was inaugurated, they got the oath wrong. They had to redo it the next day. I'm sure he will not make that mistake again. He carries the card with him all the time at this point. Rahm Emanuel, you saw the relationship between Joe Biden and Barack Obama up close as White House Chief of Staff. Tell us a little more about it.
I described it as a head and a heart. I mean, it was just touched on. President Obama was meticulous to a point. You could tell, I mean, he was very cerebral and very intellectual. And Joe Biden was a candidate that, you know, was a person also by hand touch and by in that effort. And he was so emotional about things, and it tells a little story about his own life. So I always refer to the relationship as one of head and one of heart. On the other hand, it was a perfect team. And if it was complete in that sense. And it was like everything else. I will say a lot of times presidencies and vice presidencies have some competition. That's just, to be honest, as a vice president starts to look on, you're talking about change, yet you want somebody who's loyal to you. I do think in this sense that they had a great friendship that ended with a great friendship.
There you see Cole and Ella Emhoff. Of course, they are the children of Doug Emhoff, now the second gentleman of the United States, husband of Kamala Harris. John, Carl, talk more about that relationship as well. You saw it, you covered both White Houses.
Absolutely. You know, one thing I thought watching George W. Bush walk down, followed by watching Barack Obama walk down, when Obama had to hand off the reins to Donald Trump, what he told his staff is that he wanted to follow the George W. Bush model of transitions. George W. Bush did everything he could to make a smooth transition for Barack Obama, gracious, And that's exactly what, even under those extraordinary circumstances following the 2016 election, handing off power to somebody who denied that he was even an American citizen and a legitimate president. Even so, Barack Obama opened up his White House to the new Trump team and told his top advisors that we're going to follow the Bush model. We are going to have a smooth transition.
There you see the Biden children, Hunter and Ashley Biden, are coming as well. Of course, Hunter was at the center of this campaign, under fire during the first impeachment trial of President Trump as he tried to make an issue of Hunter Biden's business dealings in Ukraine. Joe Biden, Cecilia Vega, never walked away from the son he loved.
It's so much a part of who he is, you know, and it's not lost that Bo Biden was 46 when he died, and Joe Biden will be sworn in as the 46th president of the United States. And it's still the one topic that brings him to tears, that he really gets emotional about it. And he said, he's told people leading up to today that he believes that it could have been his son taking this oath of office today. And also, George, just quickly, I was struck by seeing Doug Emhoff's children walk in. You know, they call Kamala Harris Mamala. These are her children. This is their family. That when they were introduced to her for the first time, she was wearing her Chucks. That this is, you know, that they talk about her as being just the mom, the woman, the woman in Chucks that they know, and yet they're still kind of weirded out by seeing their dad on television, on CNN, doing interviews. And of course, he is a lawyer and will be entering Georgetown Law School to teach there when they make the move here today to Washington.
Lindsay Davis, they met on a blind date. She Googled him beforehand. But I love the anecdote I was reading just a couple days ago. His first wife went to dinner with the two of them and said, "You made him a better man."
And she says that they have a great relationship. And her friend, by the way, had told her, don't Google him before that blind date. I did want to just point out the fashion, because we saw, obviously, Hillary Clinton coming out in her purple pantsuit. Kamala Harris opting not to follow that fashion trend today. She is wearing a dress designed by Christopher John Rogers and Sergio Hudson. Christopher is a young black designer from Baton Rouge, currently lives in New York City. Sergio is a black designer from South Carolina. And Joe Biden wearing perhaps the most iconic American designer, Ralph Lauren, who had also dressed Hillary Clinton and Melania Trump in 2017. Also, the second gentleman wearing a Ralph Lauren suit as well. And Dr. Jill Biden is wearing a blue wool tweed coat and dressed by emerging designer Alexandra O'Neill of Markarian, and very intentionally hand embellished by crystals and pearls to subtly reflect the light. I imagine that is meant both literally and figuratively.
He was talking about that yesterday, and there, of course, you see the current Vice President of the United States for another hour or so, Mike Pence, and his wife, Karen Pence. John Carl, I think there was never any question, really, whether Mike Pence would show up today. Deep down, he is an institutionalist as well.
No question at all. He was going to be at this inauguration no matter what. He was a Trump loyalist, but he is an institutionalist. He took this role as vice president seriously, and part of the way he saw it was loyalty to the president, but more importantly, loyalty to the Constitution and loyalty to the traditions, American political traditions, and that's why he's here.
Mary Alice Parks, pick up on this as well. We were talking about where he fits in the Republican Party going forward, if at all, how the Republican Party moves beyond Trump.
You know, we were talking about seeing Senator Ted Cruz, and I don't think that Democrats view this impeachment as the only moment of possible repercussions for what happened with that riot. I think that they are dealing with the impeachment, but they have talked a lot about whether there should be serious repercussions for some of those senators that were engaged in perpetuating bogus claims about the election. And, you know, George Bush, too, in his statement about the insurrection, he said he was deeply disappointed with political leaders who were, again, just questioning a valid and fair election. So I think that this idea of consequences or of accountability does not stop with the outgoing president, but we're going to see a continued conversation about the future of some of those Republicans who want to continue to have a seat at the table in Congress.
Let me add, if I could. You know, you have people like Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, former United States Supreme Court clerks, people who know the law and know the Constitution, who knowingly lied to angry and desperate people who had voted for the president, and they knowingly lied to them. That's what they did. They knew there was no way for Mike Pence to do anything on January 6th, and there needs to be acknowledged that that happened for two reasons. Because they were pursuing their own ambition, and they weren't doing a thing to try to help Donald Trump because they knew they couldn't.
You also had a solid majority of the House Republican caucus vote that way as well. This ceremony, boy, it's just hard as you look at it right now and you see all those masks. I'm going to bring Jen Ashton back on this. What a sign of the times.
Absolutely, George. We have to remember it was just about 9 months ago that we heard the CDC do an about face and say that they're recommending face coverings for all lay people. We've never seen that before, and to see it now in the setting of unprecedented deaths and an out-of-control pandemic and an inauguration is just really historic.
You see double masks there at times as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see that recommendation as well with possibly an N95 on the inner layer and another outer layer. Some aerosol scientists saying that it does offer more protection.
And now,
ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Michael R. Pence and Mrs. Karen Pence.
Vice President Pence making his way out. You hear that applause there. He was leaving office as governor of Indiana when Donald Trump chose him to be vice president, resurrected his career at that time, paid him back with loyalty over 4 years, some would say to a fault, but a final break at the end. Mary Bruce, we're talking about signs of the times, not only masks on the faces of all those people on the steps today, many members of Congress wearing body armor.
George, just astounding and certainly a sign of the time. Some Democratic members are, we've learned, wearing body armor out here today underneath their coats. In fact, our reporter Ben Siegel spotted some Democrats greeting each other by sort of tapping on their chest, sort of a subtle acknowledgement that they are prepared. Because, of course, it was just 2 weeks ago. It's not just that they witnessed, you know, this horrific violence. They were victims of it. So many who are here today to mark this transfer of power were themselves whisked away off of the Senate or House floor into a secure location. And so many members of Congress, like the rest of the country, are still reeling from this, but in a very personal way. And I have to say, on a very different note, it is just remarkable here. It's always one of my sort of favorite parts of an inauguration is just to watch former presidents and congressional leaders pal around. I have to say, President Bush, as he often does at these things, appears to be having a pretty good time. It's just fun to be able to see all of them interact, the children, the grandchildren. You know, we saw Joe Biden's granddaughters there. He is so incredibly close with them. They talk all day pretty much in one never-ending constant conversation. There they are, along with the youngest Biden there, Hunter Biden's baby son. But it is just such a split screen to think that you have, you know, so many coming together to mark really this next chapter at the same time that so many are still coming to terms and grappling with what we saw here just 2 weeks ago.
That's right, Mary, and I want to bring in Pierre Thomas for more on that, because, Pierre, every single day that goes by, we learn how much more horrifying it was inside that Capitol, inside those chambers. Members of Congress could have lost their lives.
Indeed, George. Law enforcement officials saying that members of Congress could have been kidnapped. Some of them could have been killed. I've been on the phone with sources all morning. They're talking about that every stop has been pulled. They are not taking any chances. I'm not surprised that members of Congress are wearing body armor. And, George, a couple of the law enforcement officials that I spoke to, including those officers who were in the melee, talked about how, while there was a major security breach, they are saying that they believe that they fought to save democracy. That they fought to save democracy. They have no doubt that the people that would storm that Capitol were coming in to take hostages and possibly kill people. And one of the officers talked about how many of the people in the crowd were trying to turn them against members of Congress, trying to get them to help them arrest members of Congress. Just extraordinary. But they're watching with a lot of pride today, George, because they believe that they helped keep the unimaginable from happening.
Right. This was not just spontaneous combustion. There were a lot of elements of pre-planning here, Pierre.
Indeed, George. We are getting information that some of those charged had talked about coming to D.C. days earlier before the January 6th certification of Biden's election to do, quote, hunting. Law enforcement officials put out a statement through court documents yesterday that members of these groups were communicating during the actual attack, communicating through Facebook messaging, talking about trapping members of Congress. Just extraordinary, and my sources are saying that the more we learn about this and how challenging the situation was for law enforcement, fist fights throughout the Capitol, George. One of the officers talked about how they were in a hall full of basic smoke and tear gas, and that the crowd was coming down the hall, and there were about 15 officers who fought back over 100 people. And he said at that point he was dragged out the door, and he was stripped of his badge. He was stripped of his, ammunition, and they were yelling, "Kill him with his own gun." Incredible, George.
Alex Rodriguez right there, I believe. Open. Yeah, right. Jennifer Lopez, of course, is going to be singing here at the inaugural. Martha Raddatz, I assume, I hope at least, the 25,000 National Guards troops are going to deter and defend against any attack today. But again, talking about signs of the times, one of the chilling ones, all those National Guard troops had to be screened for an insider threat.
They were all vetted, and in fact, George, some of them have been kicked out. 2 members, they said, because of extremist statements that were found, and about a dozen others because of criminal background or criminal activity not related to extremism. But that has been a problem in the military over the years. They have fought to get white supremacists out and extremists out. I know they're going to double down on that going forward. But 25,000 National Guard members, again, these are citizen soldiers. This is not their full-time job. They can be nurses, they can be hairdressers, they can be anything, and they were all called to duty. I think you just saw Eugene Goodman going by there. They were all called to duty after January 6th. There was a very mild presence of National Guard on January 6th. They didn't want them to be in tactical gear. The mayor of D.C. did not want that look. But now they've got 25,000. And I'll tell you also, George, there are all these ceremonial military there. It's wonderful to look at those bands. There will be many more ceremonies as the day goes on. But there are seen and unseen military officers ready to respond to any kind of threat today.
And there we see Kamala Harris, Doug Emhoff, making their way down the Capitol steps. Byron, you said this means an awful lot to people like your daughters who look like her.
George, that's absolutely right. I mean, there is the power of possibility when you see someone who looks like you. Black or white, we as a nation celebrate first. We see it as progress, not a problem. Certainly some in the shadows of America fear diversity. But this day, these images, George, remind us this time, fear did not win.
Kamala Harris will make history just about an hour from now. As we see, Pete Buttigieg is going to be incoming Secretary of Transportation, along with his husband, Chasten. 2 vice presidents talking there, Dan Quayle and Mike Pence, greeted now by Bill Clinton.
Accompanying the Vice President-elect, the Chief of Inaugural Ceremonies, Maria Miller-Lohmeyer, the Acting Deputy House Sergeant-at-Arms, Kevin Grubbs, and the Acting Deputy Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, United States Capitol Police Officer, Private First Class Eugene O. Goodman.
Eugene Goodman, Capitol Police Officer, under assault 2 weeks ago, now escorting the Vice President-elect.
Bonjour, 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 frères et sœurs et amis dans le Seigneur, que la paix et la grâce de Dieu vous soient. Nous saluons dans le nom précieux de Jésus et nous nous remercions le fait que vous branchez sur la chaîne de Tele Brockton, l'émission Rendez-Vous, qui c'est émission pour là, qui passait du lundi au vendredi et qui passait du lundi au vendredi, nous capables de dire 11h, 1h avec vous, votre serviteur, le pasteur Matthieu Delismé. Nous comptons, nous avec vous matin pour nous capables de suivre gros cérémonie ça, gros célébration ça, et gros événement ça, côté président Biden pour aller prêter serment. Alors, nous-mêmes, nous comptons Tele Brockton est là pour, quel soit côté action, Tele Brockton là pour capable venir aider comprendre ça qui a passé là, je dis que c'est 20 janvier 2021, un jour qui en pile, non, nous t'a prétendre parce que, il y a un paquet de bagailles qui pas passé bien, et dans l'administration qui était avant. Alors, mes amis, nous sommes capables de dire nous, émission ça, show ça, je dis, li vraiment, et la dédié, n'a prêté seulement sur inauguration, égal, nous pas gagner, nous pas gagner, et pasteur Samuel Yodia, parce que nous connaissons son gros jour, son jour pour tout le monde était là, pour être capable de suivre événement ça, pour être capable de KAMALA Harris comme ses premiers noirs et premiers petits immigrants, deux parents et madame ça, c'est tous de ces immigrants, une sortie aux Indes et sont indiennes, et puis l'autre la sortie les mêmes Jamaica égal, et puis c'est première fois tout a gagné une fille comme vice-président des États-Unis. Alors mes amis, nous-mêmes nous connaissons, nous pas jamais pas commencer sans que nous pas mettre bon Dieu devant, on mettait bon Dieu devant, on nous et la prière ensemble, et puis pour nous capables on nous la prière ensemble, et puis pour nous capables continuer suivre émission ça qui c'est cérémonie ça qui c'est cérémonie côté nous avons gagné pour la première fois une dame, une fille cap première et quand même cap vice-président, c'est-à-dire que vice-président des États-Unis, c'est pas bagaille qui fait du tout. Alors nous demandons pour capable et suivre avec nous-mêmes pour capable et pour capable arrêter, pour capable ouais événement ça sous gain petit monde ou gain quel soit et jeune petit mademoiselle qui venir pour capable ouais pour capable et aider et pour capable ouais que demain si Dieu veut yo même tout yo capable dans place ça dans position ça, parce que depuis que ou kembe tête ou depuis que ou aller l'école, depuis que ou pas faire ça pas ça ou continuer à aller l'école, c'est normal ça qui rive. Et KAMALA Harris là lui-même li capable river pour même tout, parce que c'est seulement ou même ou besoin mettez tête en place ou besoin arrêter l'école et vous besoin faire bon Dieu confiance, tout mettre bon Dieu devant dans tout ça quoi, fait que ce soit rêve ou gagnant li capable réaliser. Alors en nous lit le Somme 127 c'est Somme côté nous connaît, et si l'Éternel ne bâtit la maison, ceux qui la bâtissent travaillent en vain. Si l'Éternel ne garde la ville, celui qui la garde veille en vain. En vain vous levez-vous matin, vous couchez-vous tard, en mangez-vous le pain de douleur, il en donne autant à ses bien-aimés pendant leur sommeil. Voici, les fils sont un héritage de l'Éternel, le fruit des entrailles est une récompense. Comme les flèches dans la main de guerrier, ainsi sont les fils de la jeunesse. Heureux l'homme qui en a rempli son corps, quoi, ils ne sont pas confus quand ils parleront avec des ennemis à la porte. Éternel notre Dieu, Papa notre qui dans celle-là, nous bénissons, nous louons et nous disons merci. Merci pour compassion, merci pour force, merci pour courage, merci pour la vie. Merci parce que matin là, nous lever, nous vivre certains événements côté et vraiment, en pile dans nous, ne doit pas capable en mesure pour face avec maladie pandémique ça qui envahit aux États-Unis. Mais nous faisons nos grâces, nous nous merci. Et nous nous merci pour tous les amis, tous les téléspectateurs, tous les frères, tous ceux qui suivent l'inauguration, qui suivent l'émission, que ce soit côté en Haïti, Canada, Brésil, Chili, Mexique, en France, et pas bon ici aux États-Unis. Nous gagnons de tous côtés, nous nous merci, accompagner, protéger. Et comme d'habitude, nous devons faire émission ça, inauguration ça, tout dans source de bénédiction pour chacun de eux-mêmes, parce que nous connaissons, nous sommes immigrants, nous avons un paquet d'immigrants là, Seigneur, un paquet de monde qui sans papier là, Dieu, qui prétendent un mot dans main, qui prétendent pour utiliser le président Joe Biden lui-même pour capable venir avec une libération pour tout le monde qui est illégal, qui sans papier, qui vivent dans le cœur sauté, qui vivent dans le cachet, depuis une machine police. Bon côté yo suspect yo senti pas vivre n'importe petit papier yo se voit qui sorti dans bureau officiel que yo pas content. Alors Seigneur, c'est vous même nous dans main où nous lever toute bagaille ça non et nous demandons on va aider Joe Biden pour capable respecter ça que l'été promettre et pendant campagne, surtout nous mêmes haïtiens, ça que l'été promettre pendant campagne. Alors nous ouais que dans les premiers 100 jours, les mêmes les gagnent domaine immigration comme priorité dans men. Alors Seigneur, nous demandons va aider pour toute bagaille capable fait bien. Nous demandons protection pour États-Unis, protection pour nouveau président ça, protection pour chef et cabinet ministériel, protection pour tout le monde qui fait partie de gouvernement ça pour capable mener pays au bon port. Seigneur, nous prions c'est parce que nous bons, mais c'est à l'honneur de ton fils Jésus qui vit et qui règne au siècle des siècles. Amen. Alors, frères et sœurs et amis dans le Seigneur, et nous saluons dans le nom précieux de Jésus, et nous nous remercions le fait que vous branchez sur la chaîne de Tele Brockton l'émission Rendez-Vous. Je dis à son grand jour que les son grand jour pour nous toutes. Alors, c'est ces amis, frères Pao, et pasteur Pao, serviteur, le pasteur Matthieu Delisme, quoique ou habitué avec nous-mêmes, c'est nous-mêmes qui là pour nous rassurer, retransmission ça, pour même en direct depuis Washington DC que n'a fait retransmission ça. Alors, et n'a pas quitté avec retransmission pour capable vivre ou même alors de temps en temps si gon bagaille nous même nous capable paraître pour nous capable aider comprendre beaucoup plus mieux. Alors partagez-les parce que nous voyons que nous avons paquet de monde sous la là nous avons paquet de monde qui déjà branché monde Sodo monde Haïti monde Okaï parce que Maxime Louisi bon Dieu béni et nous gagne et Berthello Jérémy bon Dieu béni et nous gagnons Pierre Joseph bon Dieu béni nous avons paquet de monde qui sous la là et nous dit bon Dieu merci le fait que yo là avec nous-mêmes. Alors n'a propose et n'a retourner tout de suite et n'a quitté avec cérémonie que bon Dieu béni.
No, it's actually all our house, and there's a way to get there.
Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. and Dr. Jill Biden.
Là où même qu'à suivre, nous voyons que c'est président Biden avec madame ni et qui apparaît là actuellement.
President Obama, his Vice President Joe Biden, now President-elect, soon to be President.
Et nous capables de dire, nous remarquons tout ancien président qui vivant, c'est seulement Jimmy Carter qui parle là, parce que l'état santé n'est pas tellement normal, mais avec le président sortant que nous parlons, et qui c'est Mr. Bush. Excusez, c'est pas Mr. Bush, non, et qui c'est Mr. Trump. Nous parlons, monsieur, vraiment. Et caméra fixée de tous côtés, nous parlons, et président Trump, le président sortant. Alors nous le président Bush et nous le président Obama. C'est bien. Alors, cérémonie n'a pas commencé et nous sommes capables de suivre.
Mr. President-elect, Madam Vice President-elect, members of Congress and the judicial branch, former presidents and first ladies, vice presidents, leaders from abroad, and a whole bunch of Bidens. America, welcome to the 59th presidential inauguration, where in just a few moments, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take their solemn oaths. This ceremony is the culmination of 244 years of a democracy. It is the moment when leaders brought to this stage by the will of the people promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish it and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, guardians of our country. Have we become too jaded, too accustomed to the ritual of the passing of the torch of democracy to truly appreciate what a blessing and a privilege it is to witness this moment? I think not. 2 weeks ago, when an angry, violent mob staged an insurrection and desecrated this temple of our democracy, it awakened us to our responsibilities as Americans. This is the day when our democracy picks itself up, brushes off the dust, and does what America always does, goes forward as a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This conveyance of a sacred trust between our leaders and our people takes place in front of this shining Capitol dome for a reason. When Abraham Lincoln gave his first inaugural address in front of this Capitol, the dome was only partially constructed, braced by ropes of steel. He promised he would finish it. He was criticized for spending funds on it during the Civil War. To those critics, he replied, "If the people see the Capitol going on, it is a sign we intend the Union shall go on." And it did, and it will. Generations of Americans gave their lives to preserve our republic in this place. Great legislation to protect civil rights and economic security and lead the world was debated and crafted under this dome. Now it falls on all of us, not just the two leaders we are inaugurating today, to take up the torch of our democracy, not as a weapon of political arson, but as an instrument for good. We pledge today never to take our democracy for granted as we celebrate its remarkable strength. We celebrate its resilience, its grit. We celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for our nation, the doctors and nurses on the front line of this pandemic, the officers in the Capitol, a new generation never giving up hope for justice. We celebrate a new president, Joe Biden, who vows to restore the soul of America and cross the river of our divides to a higher plane. And we celebrate our first African American, first Asian American, and first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, who stands on the shoulders of so many on this platform who have forged the way to this day. When she takes the oath of office, little girls and boys across the world will know that anything and everything is possible. And in the end, that is America, our democracy, a country of so much good. And today, on these Capitol steps and before this glorious field of flags, we rededicate ourselves to its cause. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce to you the senator who has worked with me and so many others to make this ceremony possible, my friend and the chair of the inaugural committee, Missouri Senator Roy Blunt.
Well, I should have known when Senator Klobuchar got involved, at least there'd be a touch of snow up here this morning. Of all the things we'd considered, I don't think snow was on my agenda till I walked out the door a moment ago. But thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and thanks to the other members of the Joint Congressional Committee on the Inauguration as we officially begin the 59th inaugural ceremony. I also want to thank the Joint Committee staff and our partners, particularly our security partners, for the way they've dealt with unprecedented circumstances. When I chaired the inauguration 4 years ago, I shared President Reagan's 1981 description of this event as commonplace and miraculous. Commonplace because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Miraculous because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Americans have celebrated this moment during war, during depression, and now during pandemic. Once again, all three branches of our government come together as the Constitution envisions. Once again, we renew our commitment to our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union. That theme for this inauguration, our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union, was announced by the Joint Committee before the election, with the belief that the United States can only fulfill its promise and set an example for others if we are always working to be better than we have been. The Constitution established that determined democracy with its first three words, declaring the people as the source of the government. The Articles of Confederation hadn't done that. The Magna Carta hadn't done that. Only the Constitution says the government exists because the people are the source of the reason it exists. They immediately followed those first three words with the words to form a more perfect union. The founders did not say to form a perfect union. They did not claim that in our new country nothing would need to be improved. Fortunately, they understood that always working to be better would be the hallmark of a great democracy. The freedoms we have today, the nation we have today, is not here just because it happened, and they aren't complete. A great democracy working through the successes and failures of our history, striving to be better than it had been. And we are more than we have been, and we are less than we hope to be. The assault on our Capitol at this very place just 2 weeks ago reminds us that a government designed to balance and check itself is both fragile and resilient. During the last year, the pandemic challenged our free and open society and called for extraordinary determination and sacrifice, and still challenges us today. Meeting that challenge head on have been and are healthcare workers, scientists, first responders, essential frontline workers, and so many others we depend on in so many ways. Today we come to this moment. People all over the world, as we're here, are watching and will watch what we do here. Our government comes together. The Congress and the courts join the transition of executive responsibility. One political party more pleased today and on every inaugural day than the other. But this is not a moment of division, it's a moment of unification. A new administration begins and brings with it a new beginning. And with that, our great national debate goes forward, and a determined democracy will continue to be essential in pursuit of a more perfect union and a better future for all Americans. What a privilege for me to join you today. Thank you. I'm pleased to call to the podium a longtime friend of the President-elect and his family, Father Leo O'Donovan, to lead us in an invocation. Please stand if you are able and remain standing for the national anthem and the pledge to our flag. Thank you, Senator. I'll have to step for me.
Gracious and merciful God, at this sacred time we come before you in need, indeed on our knees. But we come still more with hope and with our eyes raised anew to the vision of a more perfect union in our land, a union of all our citizens to promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We are a people of many races, creeds, and colors, national backgrounds, cultures, and styles, now far more numerous and on land much vaster than when Archbishop John Carroll wrote his prayer for the inauguration of George Washington 232 years ago. Archbishop Carroll prayed that you, O Creator of all, would assist with your Holy Spirit of counsel and fortitude the President of these United States, that his administration may be conducted in righteousness and be eminently useful to your people. Today we confess our past failures to live according to our vision of equality, inclusion, and freedom for all. Yet we resolutely commit still more now to renewing the vision, to caring for one another in word and deed, especially the least fortunate among us, and so becoming a light for the world. There is a power in each and every one of us that lives by turning to every other one of us, a thrust of the Spirit to cherish and care and stand by others, and above all, those most in need. It is called love, and its path is to give ever more of itself. Today, it is called American patriotism, born not of power and privilege, but of care for the common good, with malice toward none and with charity for all. For our new president, we beg of you the wisdom Solomon sought when he knelt before you and prayed for an understanding heart so that I can govern your people and know the difference between right and wrong. We trust in the counsel of the letter of James. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Pope Francis has reminded us how important it is to dream together. By ourselves, he wrote, we risk seeing mirages, things that are not there. Dreams, on the other hand, are built together. Be with us, holy mystery of love, as we dream together. Help us under our new president to reconcile the people of our land, restore our dream and invest it with peace and justice and the joy that is the overflow of love. To the glory of your name, forever, amen.
Father Donovan, a longtime friend of the Biden family, former president of Georgetown, as we heard.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the presentation of our national colors by the Armed Forces Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem, and for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Après prière là, ça c'est hymne national des États-Unis.
Ladies and gentlemen, here for the singing of our national anthem, accompanied by the President's own United States Marine Band, please welcome Lady Gaga.
Frères et sœurs et amis dans le Seigneur, nous rappelons que vous suivre l'émission Rendez-Vous sur la chaîne de Tele Brockton et nous avons suivi l'inauguration Joe Biden. Ça c'est Lady Gaga, une grosse vedette américaine qui va chanter l'hymne national des États-Unis.
Lady Gaga had to have some kind of an amazing outfit. The most exuberant Star-Spangled Banner you may have ever heard. Lady Gaga right there.
Wow, wow. Bel bagay, Lady Gaga. Compliment. You nailed it. Good job.
Big moment there for Lady Gaga. Now it is time for the Pledge of Allegiance. That will be led by Andrea Hall. She's a firefighter from Fulton County, Georgia.
Please welcome from the city of South Fulton, Georgia Fire and Rescue Department, President of the International Association of Firefighters, Local 3920, Fire Captain Andrea M. Hall for the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance.
First African woman in that department's history to be named captain.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Her union, the first to endorse Joe Biden. And of course, Georgia, one of his biggest wins.
What you are all about to be part of, America, is a historic moment of firsts. to administer the oath to our first African American, our first Asian American, and our first woman Vice President, Kamala Harris, it is my great privilege to welcome to the inaugural stage the first Latina to ever serve on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
The duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Frères et sœurs et amis dans le Seigneur, nous faites saute et témoins. L'histoire, c'est la première fois dans l'histoire des États-Unis que une fille, non seulement son fille, et puis c'est en noir, et puis qui c'est petit deux immigrants. C'est la première fois que ça fait dans l'histoire des États-Unis. Alors, on nous suit et président Joe Biden.
During her swearing in as Attorney General and also as Senator.
And now we are going to hear, after Hail Columbia, Jennifer Lopez is going to be singing as well.
Please welcome Jennifer Lopez to perform This Land Is Your Land and America the Beautiful, accompanied by members of the President's own United States Marine Band.
Lady Gaga, Jennifer Lopez, both making resplendent fashion statements today.
Nous voulons profiter de saluer toutes les amis qui suivent nous. Et la sœur Rita Maxi, la sœur Gladys Nazaire, nous saluons dans le nom précieux de Jésus. Et la sœur Lucie Blanchard, bon Dieu béni nous.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking down that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land, oh, from sea to shining sea. Una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Let's get loud. This land was made for you and me.
Ça, c'était Jennifer Lopez. Justice pour tout le monde. Wow. N'a profité de saluer les amis qui ont suivi Jean-Marie, Jean-Volvic, nous saluons.
That was great. The sun is shining, and Mr. President
Jeff Joseph,
this
nous
is
saluons.
the first inauguration in the history
And the First
of America
Lady,
where
Camille
J-Lo
Redwood,
was the warm-up act
Kid.
for Chief Justice Roberts.
I greet you in the name of Jesus.
It is now my distinct honor to introduce the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, John Roberts, to administer the presidential oath to the next President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
Alors tout le monde prend attention et président Biden pour le sermenter.
Please stand for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Pour le prêter serment comme 46e président des États-Unis. Lui-même avec madame ni, nous capables voir ça là. OK, on suit.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
Office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Time held the chief played for Joe Biden. Joseph Robinette Biden will be the 46th President of the United States. He was congratulated as Mr. President. He will officially become President in about 9 minutes, 9.5 minutes at noon, as he's giving the address. We saw Dr. Joe Biden overcome with emotion in that moment. Who wouldn't be?
Alors mes amis, nous fait ce témoin, président Joe Biden, qui fait sémenter comme 46e président des États-Unis. Ça, c'est l'histoire. Alors, qu'on y a là, je préparé pour lui et faire discours, pour lui parler. Alors, comme on dit nous, et ça c'est l'histoire. Et ça fait que tu dis, depuis peut-être pour couper l'esprit pour le chapeau. Et je crois que si nous suivons bien, et Jodia fait exactement le 48e anniversaire depuis que M. Joe Biden, président Joe Biden, est rentré dans le Sénat.
The bells at Howard University will now ring 49 times before the inaugural address.
C'est belle bagaille, hein? Keep the faith. Keep la foi. Quel soit rêve ou gain. Mettre bon Dieu devant comportement, étudier, et puis pas peur. Un échec, 2 échecs, 3 échecs, 4 échecs, c'est bon problème. Continuez. Keep the faith. Kembe la foi. Et puis, bon Dieu passe à vous. C'est ça. Joe Biden, c'est à nous suivre.
Great privilege and high honor to be the first person to officially introduce the 46th President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden Jr.
All right. Regarde, qu'on y a monsieur Balbaye, message à la nation. Il va le parler avec le peuple là. Nous rappelons et on va suivre Tele Brockton.
Leader McConnell, Vice President Pence, and my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. This is America's day. This is democracy's day. A day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries. As we look ahead in our uniquely American way, restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on the nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service. I've just taken the sacred oath each of those patriots have taken, the oath first sworn by George Washington. But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we, the people, who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation. We are good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far. But we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. Once-in-a-century virus that silently stalks the country. It's taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A cry for survival comes from the planet itself, a cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this. Bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus. We can reward work and rebuild the middle class and make health care secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all are created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial, and victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge. And unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America when we've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh, all of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the Great Mall, where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand, where 108 years ago, at another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. And today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand, across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever. To all those who supported our campaign, I'm humbled by the faith you've placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. And if you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans. All Americans. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, a saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay in bed wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand. There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. This is what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, we're going to need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. We will get through this together. Together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House and the Senate up here, we all understand the world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again. Not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And in my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic. Those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. We'll honor them by becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be. So I ask you, let's say a silent prayer for those who've lost their lives and those left behind, and for our country. Amen. Folks, this is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up, all of us? It's time for boldness, for there's so much to do. And this is certain. I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master this rare and difficult hour? Will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world to our children? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, we'll write the next great chapter in the history of the United States of America, the American story. A story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, at least for me, and it goes like this. The work and prayers of century have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through, America, America, I gave my best to you. Let's us add our own work and prayers to the unfolding story of our great nation. If we do this, then when our days are through, our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best, they did their duty, they healed a broken land. My fellow Americans, I close the day where I began, with the sacred oath. Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you. I will defend the Constitution. I'll defend our democracy. I'll defend America. And I'll give all of you, keep everything I do in your service, thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together, we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generation to follow. So, with purpose and resolve, we turn to those tasks of our time, sustained by faith, driven by conviction, and devoted to one another and the country we love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
The inaugural address of Joseph Robinette Biden, now 46th President of the United States. Powerful, personal, emotional at times, delivered with command. The new president called Americans to empathy and action. He noted those events of 2 weeks ago, the siege of the Capitol, noted that our democracy is fragile, is precious, but it has prevailed.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
As I said, he called Americans to empathy, saying we can't harden our hearts, we must open our souls, put ourselves in each other's shoes, as his mother taught him.
Garth Brooks to perform Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've known sing God's praise than when we first begun. If I can ask you to sing this last verse with me, not just the people here, but the people at home, at work, as one, united. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Amen. Garth Brooks, Amazing Grace. Echoing the new president's calls to unite America. We'll now hear a poem from Amanda Gordon. Not quite social distance there for Garth Brooks. Hugs there. Former President Bill Clinton, former First Lady. Guess he can't help himself. Roy Blunt.
Hard not to be reminded of President Obama's singing that same song at the Mother Emanuel Church. A song that in our culture is as close to both poetry and prayer as you could possibly come. And we're going to finish with those two things. Let me introduce Amanda Gorman, our nation's first ever National Poet Laureate.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it in its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Wow. How's that for a national debut? Most of us will remember where we were when we heard Joe Biden take the oath of office, give his inaugural address. We will all remember when we heard Amanda Gorman speak to the world as America's first National Youth Poet Laureate.
Amanda Gorman. Now for our benediction, I'm pleased to introduce Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman, the pastor of the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Wilmington, Delaware, a friend of President Biden for 30 years.
As a nation and people of faith gathered in this historical moment, let us unite in prayer. God, we gather under the beauty of your holiness and the holiness of your beauty. We seek your face, your smile, your warm embrace. we petition you once more in this celebration. We pray for divine favor upon our President, Joseph R. Biden, and our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and their family. We further ask that you would extend the same favor upon our Vice President, Kamala D. Harris, and our second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and their family. More than ever, they and our nation need you. We need you, for in you we discover our common humanity. In our common humanity, we will seek out the wounded and bind their wounds. We will seek healing for those who are sick and diseased. We will mourn our dead. We will befriend the lonely, the least, and the left out. We will share our abundance with those who are hungry. We will do justly to the oppressed, acknowledge sin, and seek forgiveness, thus grasping reconciliation. In discovering our humanity, we will seek the good in and for all our neighbors. We will love the unlovable, remove the stigma of the so-called untouchables. We will care for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, emotionally challenged, and the poor. We will seek rehabilitation beyond correction. We will extend opportunity to those locked out of opportunity. We will make friends of our enemies. We will make friends of our enemies. People, your people, shall no longer raise up weapons against one another. We will rather use our resources for the national good and become a beacon of life and goodwill to the world. And neither shall we learn hatred anymore. We will lie down in peace and not make our neighbors afraid. In you, O God, we discover our humanity. In our humanity, we discover our commonness. Beyond the difference of color, creed, origin, political party, ideology, geography, and personal preferences. We'll become greater stewards of your environment, preserving the land, reaping from it a sustainable harvest, and securing its wonder and miracle-giving power for generations to come. This is our benediction, that from these hallowed grounds, where slaves labored to build this shrine and citadel to liberty and democracy, let us all acknowledge, from the indigenous Native American to those who recently received their citizenship, from the African American to those whose foreparents came from Europe and every corner of the globe, from the wealthy to those struggling to make it, from every human being regardless of their choices, that this is our country. As such, teach us, O God. As such, teach us, O God, to live in it, love in it, be healed in it, and reconcile to one another in it, lest we miss kingdom's goal. To your glory, majesty, dominion, and power forever. Hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. In the strong name of our collective faith. Amen.
Please remain standing as the Armed Forces Color Guard retires our national colors.
Echoes of Martin Luther King Jr. there. In the benediction, Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman, with a prayer and a plea for unity in this country so deeply divided right now. Cecilia Vega, unity, the theme of the day, the theme of this inaugural ceremony, the theme of Joe Biden's presidential campaign, clearly going to be the early theme of his presidency. He said, "My whole soul is in this, bringing America together."
George, this was an inaugural speech aimed at uniting the country, but so much of this was speaking directly to Donald Trump supporters or those who may be doubting Joe Biden's legitimacy. He said, we won this. This is democracy. You are seeing it in action. It's not about a candidate. Democracy has prevailed. But he also used this moment to attempt to reclaim truth. We just saw an outgoing president who, by counts, issued more than 33 some odd thousand assaults on the truth, mistruths, and this was about taking truth and reclaiming facts, George.
He did do that, and Mary Bruce, you're there at the Capitol today. He did not shy away from mentioning that siege of the Capitol 2 weeks ago. Told the country, told the world, what we saw there will not prevail.
It was a fierce rejection of that kind of hate, of that kind of violence, as he did make this call for unity. And George, I have to say, I've listened to a lot of Joe Biden speeches, and he talks about unity a lot. And what always strikes me is that Biden is not a man of hyperbole. He views unity not as some lofty goal, but as a practical necessity. And you heard that here today, him saying to tackle this pandemic, to address racial injustice, the country's going to have to come together. Put aside your differences and work towards some common goals. As he said, without unity, there is no progress. And of course, without mentioning President Trump's name, it was a clear rejection of Trumpism. I kept thinking about, that famous line that Donald Trump said, I alone can fix it. The message today from Joe Biden was we alone can fix it. If this country has any hope of moving forward, it is going to take everyone coming together. And as Cecilia said, that message to the more than 70 million Americans who voted for President Trump was quite simple and very classic Joe Biden. Him essentially saying, just give me a chance.
Give him a chance. He used that folks a few times. Rachel Scott up there on Capitol Hill, part of that message, I will be a president for all Americans.
That's exactly what he was saying, and it was his main message on the campaign trail. It was the theme of this inauguration here today, and of course, it comes only 2 weeks after we saw what was an insurrection here at the Capitol. Joe Biden saying, this is a new chapter. Let's turn the page. Let's write this. And so much of this was about democracy prevailing at a time when it was tested. Democracy prevailing at a time when we saw rioters here try to overturn the results of an election. And I can't help but think about Vice President Mike Pence there, who was under immense pressure to do something that he constitutionally just...
Well, frères et sœurs et amis dans le Seigneur, et nous faisons témoins et l'inauguration du président Joe Biden, qui c'est 46e président des États-Unis. Alors, frères et sœurs et amis dans le Seigneur, nous vraiment contents et nous sentons contents le fait que ou même ou là où était ou branché sur la chaîne de Tele Brockton, l'émission Rendez-Vous, qui c'est émission pour là qui passait du lundi au vendredi 11h-1h avec vous votre serviteur le pasteur Matthieu Delismé. Mes amis, ça c'était une très belle cérémonie, c'était une cérémonie côté vraiment et tout monde content cérémonie côté vraiment nous tout et applaudi tout le monde applaudi, tout le monde qui était là nous ouais que te président Obama qui était là, président Clinton qui était là, président Bush qui était là, tout président et c'est président Jimmy Carter qui part là parce que état santé le pas bon dans living président et puis avec président George président Mr. Trump, président Trump qui part là dans la cérémonie, mais nous ouais, t'es grand pile godin était là et nous ouais, un paquet de monde qui était là. Mes amis, et alors ça qui est important c'est que dans le message président Biden lui-même, il fait connaître que lui-même dit là, c'est président pour tout le monde. Il va bien connaître si tu voté pour lui-même, si pas voter pour lui-même, il c'est président pour tout le monde et il fait appel à conscientisation, il fait appel à l'unité, il fait appel pour tout le monde capable mettre tête ensemble pour capable et goumer pour capable surtout avec bagaille pandémique ça qui gagne et pas bon ici et aux États-Unis qui a ravagé le pays parce que de 400 quelques monde là qui sont morts et dans question mouvement et pandémique là. Alors mes amis, c'est comme ça et nous voyons que le président Joe Biden lui-même a été parlé et pour Amérique, parler que il dit Amérique c'est pays nous que lié et c'est pour nous faire tout ça nous capable pour nous capable même pour nous capable mettre différences de côté pour nous capable vivre et très bien. Alors c'est ça et puis nous tout un peu le monde qui était performé, Lady Gaga qui était performé, Jennifer Lopez qui était performé et nous avons une jeune demoiselle tout qui était son poète qui était et dit en poésie mais mes amis c'est ça. Alors c'est ça fait que et petit monde qui a pleuvé bagay ça aussi sont des choses pour nous witness, pour nous ouais, pour nous garder et son façon pour nous capable et prendre ça comme exemple. Depuis que vous avez connaissance, depuis que vous avez discipline ou bien, depuis que vous faites tout ça pour faire, vous pas besoin de peur, le pour l'arrivée, vous shine, vous briller tant que tout le monde. Alors poésie son poésie, c'est même parce que son poésie que mademoiselle a te mettez et pour être capable unifier tout le monde, faire tout le monde réunir, tout le monde parler de anciens esclaves, parler de première fille noire qui c'est vice-président des États-Unis, ça son bagage que en pile monde pas penser sur ta rapport. Alors c'est ça mes amis, nous fait sortir et suivre l'inauguration. Alors nous dit nous nous merci tout le monde qui t'a suivre émission ça, qui t'a suivre événement ça, c'est un événement historique qui t'a suivre nous merci le fait qu'on t'a suivre sur la chaîne de Tele Brockton l'émission Rendez-Vous. Nous connaissons jeudi c'est mercredi, nous t'a supposé gagner avec nous-mêmes le pasteur Samuel Loa, mais nous connaissons à cause de événement ça, c'est un événement que tout le monde depuis un temps pour être capable de la caillou pour être capable suivre parce que tout ça fait partie de l'histoire, c'est ça que les sociétés et grand pile monde qui bagaille pas suivre mes amis li important pour nous suivre gen bagaille yo été dans mémoire gen bagaille pour capable dire songer 50 ans ou bien 20 ans 30 ans et de slam t'es l'âme d'ap suivre premier dame qui vice-président comme non seulement noir et puis et qui c'est une fille et puis qui c'est petite de immigrants. Au bon, tout bagage ça ce sont des choses pour nous capables vivre, pour nous capables. Alors nous saluons tous les amis qui t'ont suivi, nous voulons dire merci avec le frère Louis, nous saluons et frère Samson Prosper, nous saluons dans le nom précieux de Jésus et la sœur Ketty Fawoul, nous saluons tous, nous merci le fait que nous t'as suivre événement ça avec nous-mêmes et aussi nous voulons saluer la famille d'Elismi qui t'a suivi nous tout, nous saluer la famille de Justou qui a suivi nous et nous voulons saluer et la sœur Rita Maxi et la sœur Gerda Clerzy, nous que quelques jours par sœur Gerda, nous saluons, nous espérons que tout bagaille très bien, nous quelques jours nous pas attendre haut et comment et petite fou a évolué mais nous espérons que au nom de Jésus tout bagaille très bien. Si tu es plus mal, peut-être nous sommes capables au courant, peut-être nous sommes capables qu'on est. Et aussi, nous voulons saluer la sœur Lucie Blanchard, nous saluons, et le frère Jean-Robert Franck, Jack Jean-Robert, nous saluons et nous nous merci. Et pour compliment, mais qu'on ait toute grâce là, toute et gloire là, aller pour bon Dieu. Nous saluons la sœur Italis, la sœur Italis Franck, nous saluons. Et tout le monde qui a suivi nous saluons et le pasteur Maxime Louise qui a suivi en direct depuis au CAI qui a suivi nous saluons et tous les amis les Élysées nous saluons Anne Ketli et Margaret Élysée et tout le monde qui a suivi nous connaît Margaret Élysée par le travail je dire parce que les TV là qu'elle est capable witness pour être capable témoin ça qui a passé là parce que nous connaît. Mes amis, nous, ça qui arrive là, ça sont gorille livre que lié. Grand pile monde qui senti plus ou moins qu'on y a là. Et me capable dire ça, mais même m'gon paquet monde qui a pris toute la sainte journée, immigrants, monde qui illégal qui a pris surtout dans sous gouvernement et président Trump là qui a pris qui a dit qui ça fait, qui ça nous pense qu'a fait. Mais qu'on y a nous gon relief, alors nous connaît et en pile de fois même tout dit ça l'homme arrive du pouvoir n'est pas l'homme pouvoir mais quand même nous pensons que et promesse Joe Biden yo et ce sont des promesses cap exécutées. Nous pensons ça, surtout pour question et dossier immigration que nous en pile monde gain problème pour question immigration. Et nous salué sœur nous c'est Josie et Auguste et nous saluons nous quelques jours nous pas attendre et sister nous saluons nous espérons que tout le monde est très bien Bolakaou et Mario Petitou et tout le monde nous saluons dans le nom précieux de Jésus. Alors tout les monde qui suivent émission nous contents et nous et message pour nous prendre pour nous tirer de ça c'est pour nous apprendre mettre tout problème de côté pour nous apprendre mettre toute indifférence de côté pour nous capable marcher mais dans la main surtout dans le moment ça que dans vivre là dans le moment de pandémie ça dans le moment ça on parle avec mon et puis après 2-3 jours et 2-3 heures de mon parle encore le temps pour mettre on sait de petits problèmes, petits bagailles de rien n'était pour nous apprendre mettre de côté pour nous capable qu'aider la main pour nous capable avancer. Alors là on dit ça c'est pas pour dire que pour arrêter pour faire abus de pouvoir ou bien pour humilier. Alors c'est ça c'est ça. Et là nous garder là bon et Mr. Trump qui était là qui a frappé l'estomac là ça passe même assister il pas capable assister. Alors mes amis c'est ça et chaque chose à son temps. Gon bagay qui do Ecclésiaste do toute bagaille c'est pour l'heure. Toute bagaille c'est pour l'heure pas gagner, pas aucun pouvoir qui durer éternellement. Faut prendre ça comme exemple. Alors pouvoir qui durer éternellement c'est seulement l'Éternel, c'est pouvoir l'Éternel là seulement qui a duré éternellement. Alors mes amis il est le temps pour nous capable apprendre les nous en position de pouvoir, les nous en position d'exécution, pas faire abus, pas humilier monde, pas battre l'estomac ou trop, qui ton petit réserve et qui ton petit fenêtre ouvert 6 ans capable si t'as vingo on bagaille et puis at least petit fenêtre ça qui doit passer là-dedans. Alors nous l'homme dans lui-même chrétien vivant lui-même il gagne mémoire côté pas même lorsque il t'a sorti le bon bagaille qui très et ce sont des choses, ce sont des exemples mais un peu là dedans yo pas kembe yo et puis c'est moment et puis après moment bon tout est fini. Alors mes amis, c'est ça, nous apprécions tout le monde qui suivent l'émission, qui suivent nous merci et le fait que vous suivez et cérémonie ça parce que nous-mêmes nous étions à ce que pour nous être capables de porter le barreau et côtoyer et qu'elle soit côtoyer dans le travail si nous avons plus de monde qui suivent nous et que ce soit dans le travail, que ce soit la CAO, que ce soit côtoyer nous-mêmes nous et tiens à ce que pour nous être capables de porter et porter inauguration ou même alors quel que soit et ça que vous avez fait ça que ou qui dit dans tête et surtout avec amis mio et mon immigrant mio que me connaît en pile dans nous là nous vraiment et ça bah nous en pile problème pour question domaine immigration mais quand même en nous mettre bon Dieu devant en nous et remettre bon Dieu tout bagage parce que nous connaît pas gagner les mêmes bon Dieu parfait parce que me connaît problème ou me connaît dans qui situation y dans qui sauter ou y dans qui confusion ko y dans qui problème ko y parce que nous connaît illégal on monde qui illégal dans pays ça les sont gens qui pas vivre bien même lorsqu'elle a fait des efforts mais lorsqu'elle a pris mais à chaque fois que les songe il pas papier ça son rappel que ça vient pour les qui font façon s'il t'a pris ils font façon les obligé ralentir façon que il t'a pris. Alors c'est ça et n'a continuer prier parce que nous connaissons par la prière toute bagarre capable faire n'a pas continuer prier. Et n'a pas quitter pour capable fin suivre reste fin cérémonie et puis n'a pas retourner tout de suite que bon Dieu bénisse.
Only possible in America. We are not a perfect nation, as he reminded us today, but the promise of America remains today like no other on earth. And I think Joe Biden, this ceremony, even the presence of Mike Pence today, reminds us what is so unique about our nation.
Chris Christie, thank you, Byron. Did Joe Biden meet the moment?
Yeah, I think he did. I think he gave the speech he needed to give. And but again, today is today. And then tomorrow work starts. And I think for all of us, whether it was Ram as mayor or me as governor, you know, the day you get sworn in is an amazing day, and you speak to your highest aspirations. And then the next day, everybody shows up to work. And then you got to decide, how are you going to execute on the aspirations that you spoke? And that's the great challenge that faces the president and faces everyone. I would say that I think that...
Mwen pi to gen Jésus pase gros l'argent. Mwen pi to pou li pase m'ta riche tout temps. Mwen pi to gen Jésus pase pi bel ka. Pito li guide mwen nan tout bagay. Ase pou m'tawa nan yon gran peyi. Le peche ta fè m'soubli. Pito que Jésus passe tout bagaille que le monde n'a pas capable. Pito que Jésus passe vanité, bito fidèle ou l'imabilité. Moi bito de Jésus passe renommé. Moi bito qu'est et vive dans la paix. Justice, Jésus-Christ, c'est un grand merveille. Parole, les plus douces, passez un gâteau miel. Pito de Jésus, li compte satisfait. Pito, suivi, li compte diriger. Assez pour toi, dans yon grand pays, le péché. Pito que Jésus fait tout bagay que le monde bataille comme que le monde bataille comme
Oui, on a dit merci à la sœur Josmani Wesh, et nous merci et pour ce beau chant, et nous plutôt que Jésus passer toute bagaille, parce que nous, si vous pas que Jésus, quel soit ça le monde baou, c'est bagaille et temporaire, c'est bagaille qui est éphémère, c'est pas bagaille qui pas là, éternel, et nous et actuellement là et le président Trump, il n'est pas même pas quelqu'un qui est un côté lié. Vous comprenez? Tandis que quelques jours de cela, quelques mois de cela, le directeur a frappé les sommets. Alors tout pouvoir, c'est pour un petit temps. Alors mes amis, et pas faire abus de pouvoir et pas mettre nous dans situation côté et sous bon pouvoir dans monde pour capable et tout le temps et à faire abus de pouvoir. Faut nous capable gagner conscience et nous même ça tout dans pays nous en Haïti nous le et nèg là dans pouvoir pour un an pour 2 ans pour 3 ans pour 4 ans 5 ans li fait li profiter alors mes amis nous t'a souhaité que tout ça aussi est arrêté comme des exemples pour nous mêmes haïtiens pour nous mêmes êtres humains pour nous mêmes peuple pour nous capables et prendre ça en considération et suivre et comment monde là pour aller suivre comment bagaille et c'est Jésus qui meilleur tout bagaille c'est que tout ça que vous entendez là sous pas gagner mon Dieu dans la vie ou charge avec problème. Alors, frères et sœurs et amis dans le Seigneur, nous comptons le fait que vous branchez ou été branchés sur la chaîne 2 et Tele Brockton, l'émission Rendez-Vous qui passait du lundi au vendredi 11h et 1h. Alors, nous demandons pour capable toujours été branchés à nous-mêmes, pas oublier pour capable partager live là, partager pour capable plus de monde qui pour capable ouais et la blague et puis il est capable béni à travers 2 émissions ça et comme moi dit nous gagnons plusieurs projets là que nous travaillons sur eux et nous travaillons sur eux mais et tôt ou tard n'a pas paraître avec eux et pour même n'a fait part de eux même et nous voulons saluer et confrère nous et Yves Winchell Rivière qui depuis New York cap suivre nous là nous saluons et dans le nom précieux de Jésus et nous nous merci le fait que vous branchez sur la chaîne 2 Tele Brockton l'émission Rendez-vous et aussi nous voulons saluer et confrère nous depuis Sodo et Gabin et Steven qui correspond à nous qui c'est nouveau correspondant nous depuis Sodo tout ça qui a passé là dans zone Haïti zone plateau central n'a gagné le privilège pour nous capable gagner et le frère Gabin et Steven avec nous-mêmes alors de comme ça tout le monde et continuer à rester branché sur la chaîne de Tele Brockton parce que nous connaissons émission ça c'est émission pas liée c'est émission qui passait du lundi au vendredi et on égal pas oublier mes amis mais même personnellement moi dit nous ça me mais que et pour nous écrire pour nous voyer des commentaires bon pour nous voyer bonne opinion nous dire ça qui a passé dire que ça nous t'a mais dire que ça que nous pas mais dire que ça qui pas bon dans émission avec ça même avec équipe que nous gagnons pour nous capable réarranger nous pour nous capable faire tout ça que nous connaissons pour nous capable porter une émission vraiment qui divertir une émission qui rafraîchir dans monde une émission qui instruire une émission et côté et tout le monde capable suivre capable garder sans problème sans difficulté nous connaissons mes amis qu'on y a là après inauguration qu'on y a là et président Joe Biden lui-même avec et vice-président Kamala Harris qu'on y a là 2 monde ça là il fait nous comprendre il fait nous connaître que et immédiatement il va passer à l'action parce que un paquet bagaille que monde ça yo pas passer à l'action il même dit que des exécutifs ordre qui va prendre des décisions exécutives qui capable prendre de la part de président Biden pour toute une série de bagages. Alors nous connaissons un paquet de monde qui a parlé de petit cobla et que il promettent là parce que ça a été avant $600 pas faire rien parce que nous connaissons un peu de monde qui pas travail et tout bagage ça sur le tapis pour nouveau président lui-même à travail sur ça pour parce que nous tape suivre et secrétaire trésorier américain lui-même dame lui-même nous tape suivre lui dit que c'est premier bagaille que il va travailler sur là sur relief c'est pandémique là sur comment il va faire pour capable aider et population aider monde qui ont petit business yo comment pour capable retourner et sur le marché encore parce que nous connaît tout problème tout ça qui fait à cause des pandémiques ça tout le monde qui perd du job yo que même Mabdo que en pile monde là et mois février là pas fait presque pas fait 1 an depuis que grand pile monde là qui pas jamais ouais on paycheck travail grand pile monde là qui pas travail grand pile monde là et qui vraiment dans nécessité et grand pile monde là qui obligé couper budget yo à zéro qui minimise tout ça qu'il y a fait, c'est bel contrôle qui a tombé juste pour être capable de survivre. Alors, mes amis, nous connaissons comment bagaille, nous continuons à prier bon Dieu pour nous voir qui ça bon Dieu capable de mettre dans le cœur monde ça capable décider avec pays monde ça et pour bon Dieu capable aider de façon pour décision qu'il a prend pour capable bon pour la communauté, pour la population. Alors nous-mêmes, nous toujours dit ça, nous là pour nous promouvoir, nous là pour nous encourager, nous là pour nous éduquer, nous là pour nous instruire, nous là pour nous aider, pour nous faire une différence dans la vie, nous là pour nous capables d'aider à vivre dans un monde tout bon. Alors nous conseiller tous jeunes garçons, toutes jeunes filles, aller l'école, rester l'école, surtout nous-mêmes qui aux États-Unis, nous pas connaître qui ça demain du vieux porter parce que ouais l'on préparé, c'est comme si vous gagnez comme la banque. Et vrai ou gagnez comme la banque. Je me rappelle me qu'on dit ça depuis que et on dit ça parce que tout a fait commerce surtout le sodo, il dit pour gagner pour vendre, c'est comme la banque ou gagne parce que à n'importe quel moment que ce soit dans la nuit, là, on est capable de tendre, on monde vit frapper partout. Madame Péral, besoin tel bagaille. Égal, comme ça, pas là. C'est comme ça. Là, à l'école, ou préparer, c'est dans la banque, ou mettez tout ça, à n'importe quel moment donné. Bénédiction pour la capable paraître, à n'importe quel moment donné. Position pour la opportunité pour la capable paraître et puis c'est le fait que tu es tout préparé, c'est pas les avoir dire moi j'ai pour mal courir à l'Atlantique non ou tout préparé depuis faire appel à vous ou dit présent et pour là. Alors c'est ça qui fait que nous-mêmes nous encourager tout le monde net et surtout pour les jeunes pour capable rester l'école et parce que nous avons pris l'exemple devant nous the sky is the limit. Par contre, nous avons pas de plafond, pas de limite. Ou bien qu'on est sous noir, sous rouge, sous jaune, sous whatever couleur il y a bleu. Depuis qu'on a connaissance dans terre tout. Et puis rêve ou poursuivre ou arriver jeune. Tout ça, comme moi dis, nous ce sont des exemples. Nous avons président Biden lui-même. Président Biden, c'est pas pour une fois. Alors, ça extrêmement important. En pile, nous peur des fêtes. Nous pouvons tomber, mais il faut nous tomber. Si nous ne pas tomber, comment on a fait une expérience? Il faut nous tomber, il faut apprendre à tomber. Parce que ça qui est important, tomber assez youn. Mais serrer la terre. Parce que ça qui est important, l'autre tomber, il faut lever. Il faut faire une façon quand même pour lever. Avec des bouffées lever, vous avez une expérience. Sauf ça, on ne va pas prendre encore. On va prendre l'autre souris, mais on ne va pas prendre encore parce que nous avons un paquet de monde qui peur. Il y a un projet, il y a une vision, il y a une idée. Mais il peur. Pour raison, il peur échec. Mais échec, ça fait partie de la vie. Il faut prendre échec pour qu'on vienne bon. 95% de monde qui en l'air qu'on y a, si tu apprends pour chita pour expliquer combien de fois il est tombé. Combien de fois il est tombé. Mais il parle de la terre. Il est levé. Pas peur, échec. C'est normal, il y a des bagages à faire, ou calculer, ou étudier, ou prier. Même lorsque le prend petit temps, mais on prie. Mais des fois, on prend trop de temps net là, tout le pas bon. Parce que pendant que l'idée dans la tête, ou mettez le sous papier, ou travaillez, ou faites tout ce pour faire, ou qu'un ou peut mettre le dehors. Et puis même idée, ça traverse l'autre monde. Et puis, monde mettre le dehors. Et puis, sortant de tout, et puisque moun nan mette le dehors, moun qui mette le dehors en vent, c'est idée liée. Il va bien qu'on ait qui c'était idée pour là, moun nan te prend non. Mais moun qui mette le dehors en vent, en grand public là, c'est idée moun nan lié. Période. Et puis là, nous tout quand gain ça, et comme défaut, ou intel prend idée, intel prend idée. Ou te gagne, pour qu'ils ne pas mettre le dehors. Once qu'on mette le dehors, il vient tourner signature. Que dans tout le monde qui vient, il y a copié sur. Nous peur échec, nous pas besoin de peur échec, mes amis. Et en plus, là, nous tous pensons que ça ne va le mettre dehors, il faut que le perfect, il faut qu'elle dise, il faut qu'elle date, mes amis. Ouais, attitude sont pas quelque bagaille lié. attitude qu'a pas faire faut arriver quand monde qui a intelligence, qui a aptitude pas arriver. Parce que je me rappelle d'un livre, je dis réussite d'un homme pas dépend de intelligence ou pas dépend de grandeur ou pas dépend de hauteur, mais elle dépend de attitude ou gain. Qui attitude qu'on gain, c'est attitude là pas le méthode dehors. Après ça aptitude bagarre relation tout bail ça vient après. Mais attitude ou le même cap méthode dehors grand paquet position c'est de monde joindre c'est attitude yo. C'est que yo pas peur, yo franchi comme ça tout lorsque vous utilisez attitude là tout dans le but et pour abuser ou qu'on vient honte tout. Alors c'est que tout bagaille c'est via gain balance. Gain balance. Et alors même moi encourage quel que soit projet gagnant, pas prendre temps avec. Mettez le dehors. Parce que pas oublier premier coup pas bien parfait. Faut gain monde qui a expérience leur paraître et puis capable critiquer fort il faut que ou apprendre et ou accepter critique yo quitte ces critiques constructives quitte ces critiques cap détruire tout faut accepter yo parce que il fait partie de la vie. C'est un forgeant qu'on devait forger si par exemple on pas essayer ou pas bien bon faut essayer faut mettre le dehors. Nous connaissons un pile monde là qui a un pile projet. Mais chaque fois qu'on prend un projet, regardez lui, il est découragé. Même si nous c'est pas découragé. Travaillez. Relons un monde qui a une expérience quelconque et puis mettez le dehors. Pas peur échec. Oui, on va prendre échec. Mais l'on prend échec là, on fait bac. On étudie lui, on regarde lui. Joe Biden. Plusieurs fois, là, les pour le président. Il n'est pas bon. Mais lui-même, il dit ça tout. L'âge, il n'a pas jamais pensé s'il était capable. Parce qu'il pense que rêve ça, il devrait mettre de l'autre côté. Mais pour l'âge, il y a 77 ans, monsieur Gain. Ou 77 ans, comme ça. Qui vient the oldest president of the United States. Et 48 ans de cela, monsieur, t'es the youngest, moun qui entre dans le Sénat. Ça veut dire que depuis où gagne la vie, pas suspendre, rêver. Et puis l'on rêver big, dream big. Depuis où gagne la vie, pas suspendre, rêver. Parce que rêve là, lui-même, comment lié depuis que vous avez caressé lui, ou bagaille lui. À n'importe quelle heure, elle paraît bien, ou éclater. Parce que quand il y a monde qui pense succès, c'est du jour au lendemain, c'est overnight. Non, pas un succès qui vient overnight. Ou pas de connaître qui quantité de misère, qui quantité de pas dormir, qui quantité d'humiliation que mon prend avant de venir récit éclater. Ou pas de connaître l'époque ça. Ou pas de connaître l'étape nettoyer terre, ou pas de connaître les phobies tap modèle, ou pas de connaître l'étape planter. Mais c'est l'or passé ou récolte la belle, ou dit oui, gardons bel jardin. Ou gardons bel épimaï, gardons bel régime banane. Mon part là, l'étape planter. Li part au part là, l'étape pan soleil là. Alors frères et sœurs et amis dans le Seigneur, moi encourager pour capable et quel soit ça que vous gagnez, pas négliger, mettez-le dehors. M'encourage pour aller à l'école, m'encourage pour être à l'école, m'encourage pour faire tout ça qui est bon dans la vie, m'encourage pour mettre bon Dieu devant. Dans tout ça que vous gagnez pour faire, pour entreprendre. M'encourage pour qu'il y ait des personnalités autour, parce que nous connaissons quand il y a des gens qui perdent du personnalité pour raison de poste, pour position. M'encourage pour qu'il y ait des personnalités, les jours pour la gain pour le venir, la venir bel et bien, sans qu'on ait besoin de faire des sacrifices et pour on sait des sacrifices qui vraiment t'es capable et qui pas nécessaire. Alors, frères et sœurs, réhabillés dans le Seigneur, nous saluons dans le nom précieux de Jésus. Nous disons tout le monde merci, tout le monde qui suit l'émission ça à tous côtés. Quel soit côté ou suivre, donc nous nous merci. Nous te remercions. Et alors, d'abord, rendez-vous demain si Dieu veut. Demain si Dieu veut, 11h, 1h, d'abord rendez-vous. Et nous connaissons demain si Dieu veut, c'est jeudi la prière avec nous-mêmes. Avec nous-mêmes. Le docteur Michel Plaisimont. Nous connaissons, c'est chaque jeudi, il gagne la bina avec et la communication. Alors, ou même, nous ne pouvons pas faire un podcast sans que nous ne pas demander aussi ou pour faire la paix à le Seigneur qui soit obtenu. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Stop thinking. He is the God of God. Bah la vie, et puis la passe à vous. Que mon Dieu bénisse. I love you all. Moi, nous toutes. Toutes amis mieux. Toutes frères mieux. Que ça côtoyer. I love you. Bye bye.
chaque heure. Oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, et demeure auprès de moi. J'ai soif de ta présence, divin chef de ma foi. Dans ma faiblesse immense, que ferais-je sans toi? Chaque jour, à chaque heure, oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, et demeure auprès de moi. Les ennemis dans l'ombre rôdent autour de moi, accablés par le nombre. Que ferais-je sans toi? Chaque jour, à chaque heure, oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, et demeure auprès de moi. Pendant les jours d'orage, d'obscurité, d'effroi, qu'enferme mon courage, que ferais-je sans toi? Chaque jour, à chaque heure, oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, et demeure auprès de moi. Oh, Jésus, ta présence, c'est la vie et la paix. La paix dans la souffrance et la vie à jamais. Chaque jour, à chaque heure, oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, Jésus, ta présence, c'est la vie et la paix dans la souffrance et la vie à jamais. Chaque jour, à chaque heure, oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, et demeure auprès de moi. Oh, Jésus, ta présence, c'est la vie et la paix dans la souffrance et la vie à jamais. Chaque jour, à chaque heure, oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, et demeure auprès de moi. Chaque jour, à chaque heure, oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, et demeure auprès de moi. J'ai soif de ta présence, divin chef de ma foi. Dans ma faiblesse immense, que ferais-je sans toi? Chaque jour, à chaque heure, oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, et demeure auprès de moi. Les ennemis dans l'ombre rôdent autour de moi. Accablés par le nombre, que J'ai soif de ta présence, divin chef de ma foi. Dans ma faiblesse immense, que ferais-je sans toi? Chaque jour, à chaque heure, oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, et demeure auprès de moi. Les ennemis dans l'ombre rôdent autour de moi, accablés par le nombre. Que ferais-je sans toi? Chaque jour, à chaque heure, oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, et demeure auprès de moi. Pendant les jours d'orage, d'obscurité, d'effroi, quand faiblit mon courage, que ferais-je sans toi? Chaque jour, à chaque heure, oh, j'ai besoin de toi. Viens, Jésus, et demeure auprès de moi. Oh, Jésus, ta présence, c'est la vie et la paix dans la souffrance et la vie à jamais.